Picture this. You're standing in the cereal aisle, a box of cornflakes in your hand, thinking, why does this cost $4 more than it did 2 years ago? There's no corn shortage, no supply crisis making headlines. It just costs more. What if I told you that price increase started not in a farm field or a factory, but in a boardroom in Riyadh, or on a trading floor in Houston, and that the person who benefited most from that extra $4 has a net worth north of $50 billion and has never once set foot in a grocery store? Your grocery bill is a pipeline, and it runs directly back to the global oil market, controlled by a small group of extraordinarily powerful people whose decisions echo through every aisle of every supermarket on Earth. Today we trace that pipeline, step by step, and by the end, you'll understand exactly who is getting rich when your food bill goes up. Most people think oil and food are separate categories. They're not. They're the same category, connected at almost every stage of production. Start at the farm. Modern industrial agriculture runs on diesel: tractors, harvesters, irrigation pumps, grain dryers. A single large combine harvester burns over 100 gallons of diesel a day during harvest season. When diesel prices double, farmers' operating costs surge. That cost gets built into the price they charge processors. Processors build it into the price they charge manufacturers. Manufacturers build it into the price they charge retailers. Retailers build it into the price on the shelf. But it goes deeper. Synthetic fertilizer, the chemical that makes modern crop yields possible, is manufactured primarily from natural gas. Ammonia-based fertilizers require enormous quantities of natural gas as both a feedstock and an energy source. When natural gas prices spike, fertilizer prices spike. When fertilizer prices spike, crop yields become more expensive to produce even before a single machine turns over. The 2022 European gas crisis caused fertilizer prices to more than triple, with direct impacts on grain prices worldwide. Then there's packaging. The plastic film on your chicken breast, the bag inside the cereal box, the foam tray under your produce, all petroleum derivatives. When oil prices rise, the cost of every single piece of packaging in the store rises with it. That cost is distributed invisibly across tens of thousands of products. So before one truck has moved, before one ship has sailed, oil has already touched your food at 3 separate points: at the farm, in the fertilizer, and in the packaging. And we haven't even started shipping yet. Now add transportation, and this is where a small oil price increase becomes a large food price increase. Every leg of the supply chain burns fuel. A banana grown in Ecuador travels by refrigerated diesel truck to a port, loads onto a container ship burning bunker fuel, one of the dirtiest, densest petroleum products in the world, crosses an ocean, unloads at a port, gets driven by diesel truck to a regional distribution center, loaded onto another truck, and driven to the back of your supermarket. That banana has been on fuel-powered vehicles for roughly 7,000 miles before you pick it up. Each of those legs has a fuel cost, and crucially, each leg applies a margin on top of its fuel cost. A trucking company doesn't pass through its exact fuel expense. It charges a fuel surcharge, which is typically higher than actual cost, because fuel costs are used as justification for margin expansion, not just cost recovery. The same is true at every link in the chain. This is the amplification effect. A 10% rise in crude oil prices doesn't translate to a 10% rise in food prices. It translates to a 10% rise that gets marked up at 6 or 7 different stages, each one compounding on the last. Academic research on the commodity-to-consumer price transmission suggests that for fuel-intensive products, every 10% crude oil price increase eventually drives a 3 to 6% increase in food retail prices. But that can take 12 to 18 months to fully work through the system, which is why consumers often feel the pain long after the underlying oil spike has reversed. You're not just paying for the fuel, you're paying for every company along the chain that used the fuel price as cover to widen its own margin. Let's name some names. Saudi Aramco is the most profitable company in human history. Its majority owner is the Saudi state, but its decisions are made by a small executive leadership closely aligned with the Saudi royal family and, through OPEC+, coordinated with Russian state oil interests. When Aramco and its OPEC+ partners decide to cut production, as they did in late 2022 and again in 2023, crude prices rise. Every price rise downstream flows, eventually, into your grocery cart. In the United States, the Koch network has been one of the most significant private players in petroleum refining and petrochemical manufacturing for decades. Koch Industries is among the largest producers of nitrogen fertilizers in North America, the exact fertilizers that become dramatically more expensive when natural gas prices spike. When fertilizer prices tripled in 2021 and 2022, Koch's fertilizer operations were among the operations generating record revenues. Then there are the commodity traders. Ivan Glassenberg, former CEO of Glencore, a company that trades physical oil, coal, copper, and agricultural commodities, built a personal fortune estimated at over $8 billion, largely through commodity price cycles. Glencore specifically profits from volatility. It buys where prices are low, sells where prices are high, and profits from the spread. When oil disruptions cause food supply disruptions, commodity traders are positioned on both sides of that market. And here's the surreal part. In 2022, as global food prices hit record highs and 828 million people faced food insecurity, according to the UN, the world's 10 wealthiest people, the majority of whom hold significant energy or commodity assets, saw their collective wealth increase by hundreds of billions of dollars. The crisis that emptied pantries for millions filled portfolios for a few. Here's what makes this particularly hard to escape. The entire global food system was built around cheap oil. That wasn't an accident. It was a design choice made over the 20th century, driven in part by the same fossil fuel interests that now benefit when costs rise. Modern industrial farming replaced labor with diesel machinery because diesel was cheap. Global supply chains stretched across oceans because bunker fuel was cheap. Plastic packaging replaced glass and paper because petroleum derivatives were cheap. Every one of those decisions made the food system more efficient when oil was at $20 a barrel, and more expensive when oil is at $80 or $100. Supermarkets, meanwhile, have consolidated dramatically. In many countries, 2 to 4 grocery chains control the majority of food retail. That concentration means retailers have significant pricing power. They can pass through supply chain cost increases quickly, but they are slower to pass through decreases. Independent research from the UK's Competition and Markets Authority found that during the 2022 food inflation surge, major supermarkets maintained or expanded their gross margins while attributing higher prices to supply chain costs. Consumers absorbed more than the underlying cost increase warranted. The architecture of the system, from oil-dependent farming to consolidated retail, is optimized to transfer price risk downward to the consumer and profits upward to asset holders. You can't restructure global energy markets from your kitchen, but you're not powerless either. And some of the most effective moves are genuinely simple. The first is short-circuiting the supply chain. Local and regional food, farmers markets, community-supported agriculture boxes, direct from farm deliveries, travels fewer miles, uses less fuel per unit of food, and doesn't carry the margin stack of a 6-leg global supply chain. It isn't always cheaper up front, but the price stability is often significantly better during oil price spikes. The The second is store brand substitution. Major grocery retailers' own label products typically sit 20 to 30% below branded equivalents for comparable quality. During inflationary periods, private label products tend to maintain price levels longer than branded goods because they don't carry advertising spend, licensing fees, or the brand premium that named manufacturers protect fiercely. The third is reducing packaging-intensive products. Whole vegetables, bulk grains, dried legumes. These have minimal petroleum-based packaging. Heavily processed foods with elaborate packaging have multiple layers of oil cost built in. A bag of lentils and a bag of dried pasta are two of the most oil price-resilient items in any supermarket. And finally, understanding the lag. Because oil price increases take 12 to 18 months to fully transmit into food prices, savvy shoppers who track commodity futures can get ahead of price rises, stocking up on shelf-stable staples before the full inflationary wave hits retail. It sounds arcane, but it's genuinely predictive. When oil spikes, plan for your grocery bill to spike 12 months later. Next time you're standing in that cereal aisle watching the price scanner, you'll know it's not just inflation in the abstract. It's a chain. Oil fields to refineries, to container ships, to trucks, to packaging plants, to distribution centers, to the shelf in front of you. And at every link, someone is taking a cut, often with the oil price as the excuse. The people at the top of that chain don't shop for groceries. They don't check prices. They don't feel the difference between a $3 loaf of bread and a $5 loaf of bread. But they absolutely feel the difference between $60 oil and $100 oil. Share this with someone who's been frustrated by food prices without knowing why. The frustration makes a lot more sense when you know who's on the other end of it. Subscribe. Next week, we're looking at how pharmaceutical companies use patent law to keep drug prices high long after they should have come down. Different industry, same playbook. See you then.